The first thing I heard wasn't birdsong, or the chatter of kids waiting for the school bus. It was the sound of metal snapping, a jagged, violent crack, followed by the sickening thud of stone hitting asphalt. I bolted upright from my porch chair. My heart slammed in my chest as I realized what I was seeing. Karen, our self-appointed queen of the HOA, was standing in front of my yard, gripping a sledgehammer with both hands. And at her feet, shattered into chunks, was the granite base of my Veterans Memorial. The American flag that once stood tall in its holder now lay face down in the dirt, the fabric smeared with dust and streaked with grease from the curb. I swear, for a split second, the entire street went silent. No cars passing, no dogs barking, just the echo of Karen's labored breathing as she sneered. "This is a violation. You were warned." My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From rage. That memorial wasn't just decoration. It wasn't just stone and steel. It was for my father, a decorated Vietnam veteran who never came back home. Neighbors peeked from behind blinds. Phones started recording. And me. I knew instantly she crossed a line you don't come back from. Because what Karen didn't realize was that destroying a veteran's memorial isn't just an HOA issue. It's a federal offense. My name's Daniel. I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, long enough to watch kids grow from training wheels to car keys, long enough to fix more roofs and mow more lawns than I can count, and long enough to know exactly the kind of person Karen is. See, I didn't put up the memorial for attention. It wasn't flashy. Just a polished granite stone, about 3 feet tall, with a bronze plaque that read, "In honor of Staff Sergeant Michael Hayes, a father, a brother, and a son, 1948 to 1969. That was my dad. He died in Vietnam when he was just 21. I was born a few months later, so I never got to meet him. But growing up, my mom told me stories about how he carried pictures of me in his helmet, how he wrote letters home, how he dreamed of teaching me to fish. So, when I bought this house back in 2010, I promised myself one thing: there would be a place in the yard that carried his name. Somewhere people could stop, tip their hat, and remember that sacrifice doesn't just live in history books. For years, nobody had a problem. Neighbors would wave when I put fresh flowers at the base. Veterans passing through would sometimes pause to salute. On Memorial Day, I'd raise the flag and host a barbecue for the whole block. Kids would run around with sparklers while their parents swapped stories on the lawn. It brought us together. Except for one person. Karen. She moved in 2 years ago, in the big beige house at the corner of Willow Drive and Maple Lane. At first, she seemed harmless, just another face at HOA meetings, always asking about dues and landscaping schedules. But it didn't take long for her true colors to show. Karen wasn't just a rule follower. She was a rule weaponizer. If your trash bin was an inch too close to the curb, she'd snap a picture. If your grass was longer than 3 inches, she'd send a warning letter. She once fined my neighbor $50 because his holiday lights were still up on January 3rd. And when she became HOA president last fall, things went from annoying to unbearable. Suddenly, she had a clipboard in one hand and her phone in the other, patrolling like it was her personal kingdom. She issued citations like candy. Every meeting turned into a lecture. But it was clear from the start that she had a special obsession with me. "Your memorial doesn't match community standards," she told me in November. "Stone fixtures must be pre-approved by the HOA Architectural Committee." I laughed, thinking she was joking. But when the letter arrived a week later, with a $150 fine stapled to the front, I realized she was dead serious. I filed an appeal. I explained what it was. I showed documentation, even a copy of the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005, which protects homeowners' right to fly the flag. Karen just smirked and said, "This isn't about the flag. It's about uniformity." And that was the moment I knew she wasn't just nitpicking. She wanted it gone. For months, it was a cold war, letters, warnings, even threats of towing my car if I didn't comply. But up until that morning, I thought it was all bark and no bite. I thought the worst she could do was bury me in paperwork. I was wrong. Because her first real strike was swinging that sledgehammer. The morning Karen smashed my dad's memorial, I thought the world had tilted off its axis. Neighbors stood frozen. Some recorded. Some gasped. One older veteran down the block actually yelled, "Hey, that's destruction of property." But Karen, she just dusted off her hands, as if she pulled weeds instead of committing vandalism. "Violation removed," she announced, loud enough for the cameras. Then she strutted away, her heels clacking on the pavement like a judge slamming a gavel. I was left staring at the rubble, my fists clenched so tight my knuckles went white. My father's plaque, dented, scratched, lying on its side. I wanted to scream, to chase her down. But instead, I took a breath, because I knew this wasn't just some petty squabble anymore. This was war. The HOA letters came first. On April 12th, I got one accusing me of unauthorized yard alterations. On April 19th, another demanding immediate restoration to HOA-approved landscaping. And by April 26th, a third one hit my mailbox, $500 in cumulative fines. Each letter was signed by Karen, in looping cursive, like she was proud of it. I tried reasoning. At the next HOA meeting, I stood up in front of 20 neighbors and explained, "This isn't a yard gnome. It's a memorial. It's protected by law. And Karen, what you did was vandalism." The room buzzed. Some nodded in agreement. Others whispered. Karen adjusted her glasses and said, calm as ice, "Daniel, you've been warned repeatedly. The HOA handbook clearly states all permanent fixtures must receive prior written approval. This was not approved. It's for my father." I shouted, "A veteran. You destroyed it in front of witnesses." She tilted her head, smirking. "The HOA isn't subject to emotional appeals. We follow rules." The gall in her voice made my blood boil. And before I could say another word, she added, "And if you don't pay your fines, Daniel, the HOA will pursue collections. Which means liens against your property." Gasps. Whispers. My stomach sank. She wasn't bluffing. The harassment didn't stop there. A week later, I woke to flashing lights. 2 police officers stood on my porch at 6:30 in the morning. "Sir, we got a call about an unpermitted flag display causing a safety hazard," one said, clearly uncomfortable. Karen was standing across the street, robe tied tight, coffee cup in hand, waving like she'd ordered delivery. I showed the officers the law, explained the federal protections. They nodded, apologized, and left. But not before Karen shouted, "Don't worry, officers, I'll file the proper reports. This isn't over." By May, things escalated further. My truck, parked in my own driveway, was suddenly labeled a violation. "Commercial vehicle, not allowed," the letter claimed. It wasn't commercial. It was a Ford F-150 with a toolbox in the back. Then came the threats about my fence, my mailbox, even the color of my shutters. It felt like every day, a new letter, a new fine, a new way for Karen to tighten the screws. And all the while, the rubble of my father's memorial sat piled near the curb. I refused to throw it away. Neighbors would see me out there, kneeling beside it, brushing dirt off the plaque. Some offered kind words. Others shook their heads, afraid to get involved. But one night, just after sunset, something changed. I caught Karen standing in front of my driveway again, phone out, snapping pictures. "Karen," I barked, "what the hell do you think you're doing?" She smiled without looking up. "Just documenting. You know, for the file." I stepped closer, my voice low. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" She finally lowered her phone, meeting my eyes. "I'm the HOA president. That makes me the law here." And that was it. The final straw. I realized, in that moment, she'd keep going until she either bankrupted me or drove me out of the neighborhood entirely. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't just some homeowner she could bully. I had something she didn't. A network, a binder full of receipts, a friend in the legal field, and an entire neighborhood growing tired of her tyranny. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by Karen's letters, photos of the smashed memorial, and witness statements. My jaw was set, my hands steady. Enough was enough. It was time to turn the tables. I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. Instead, I spread every HOA letter across my dining table like evidence in a detective's case. Each one was marked, dated, signed by Karen. Each one was another nail in her coffin. But I knew one thing: anger wasn't enough. If I wanted to stop her, I had to be smarter, methodical, surgical. So I picked up my phone and called an old friend, Mark. He wasn't just a buddy from college. He was a lawyer, specializing in property and HOA law. "Daniel," he said after listening to my story, "what she did with that sledgehammer, that's not just vandalism. That's desecration of a memorial. Under Federal Statute 18 U.S. Code Section 1369, damaging a veteran's memorial is a federal crime. She could face fines and even prison time." Hearing those words felt like oxygen after drowning. Mark told me to start documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, witness statements, video clips from neighbors. Build a case file. Don't just rely on one thing. Overwhelm them with evidence. So that's exactly what I did. For the next 2 weeks, I became a man on a mission. Every night, I scanned Karen's letters into PDFs. I organized them by date in a binder so thick it could have stopped a bullet. I printed screenshots of her emails, petty, smug, always signed, respectfully, HOA President Karen L. I even pulled the HOA bylaws from the county clerk's office. I highlighted every section she had violated herself. Funny thing, her own mailbox was 2 inches taller than regulation. Her fence was repainted without approval. Her dog exceeded the HOA's weight limit. I laughed as I highlighted each contradiction. Hypocrisy piled up like ammunition. Neighbors started whispering. At first, they were nervous to speak out. But once word spread that I was fighting back, the stories poured in. "She fined me $75 because my blinds were cream, not white," one family said. "She made me repaint my deck 3 times," another admitted. "She tried to tow my daughter's car for parking in our own driveway," a third added. I wrote it all down. Statement after statement. Karen had made enemies out of almost everyone. But the pièce de résistance. The video. Remember those phones that caught Karen swinging the sledgehammer? I tracked down the clearest clip, courtesy of my neighbor, Tom. The footage showed Karen in broad daylight, destroying the memorial, then announcing, "Violation removed." Crystal clear. In her own words, Mark helped me prepare the legal package. 1. Criminal complaint for destruction of a veteran's memorial. 2. Civil claim for damages and emotional distress. 3. HOA misconduct report backed by bylaw violations and neighbor testimonies. We even drafted a petition for Karen's removal as HOA president. All it needed was signatures. Late at night, I'd sit at my printer, pages spitting out like a machine gun. Every so often, I'd pause, paranoid that Karen might peek through my windows. At one point, the printer jammed, and my heart nearly stopped, because the thought of her catching me in the act felt like being caught in enemy territory. But by June 1st, everything was ready. I had the evidence. I had the law. And most importantly, I had the community. We set the stage for the next HOA meeting, the one Karen thought she'd walk into like a queen surveying her kingdom. She had no idea the ambush waiting for her. The evening of June 10th, the HOA meeting hall buzzed louder than I'd ever heard it. Folding chairs scraped across linoleum, neighbors shuffled in with arms crossed and eyes narrowed. Word had spread. This wasn't just another lecture about lawn height. This was Judgment Day. Karen swept in like she always did, heels sharp against the tile, clipboard tucked under one arm. She wore her trademark power scarf, bright red, like she was declaring herself royalty. "Let's get started," she said, tapping her pen against the table. "First order of business, unresolved violations. Daniel, that includes your noncompliance fees, which now total $1,275. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen smiled, enjoying the drama. I stood slowly, a thick binder in my arms. My voice was calm, but it carried. "Actually, Karen, I think the first order of business tonight is you." The room stilled. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum quieter. I flipped open the binder and laid it on the table with a heavy thunk. "Exhibit A," I said, sliding a glossy photo across. Karen destroying a federally protected veterans memorial. Witnessed by half this neighborhood. On April 3rd, at 9:14 a.m. I hit play on the video clip. The screen showed Karen's face, twisted in effort, as she swung the sledgehammer. The sound of granite splitting filled the room. Then her voice, echoing. Violation removed. The silence that followed was suffocating. Every eye in the room turned to her. Karen stammered. That video is out of context. I cut her off. Exhibit B, 18 U.S. Code Section 1369. Federal law. It is a crime to willfully injure or destroy any structure commemorating service of the armed forces, punishable by fines and imprisonment. I leaned in, my voice low and sharp. You didn't just violate an HOA bylaw, Karen. You committed a federal offense. The audience erupted. Whispers, gasps, even a few shouts. One neighbor muttered, "She's done." Karen's face flushed crimson. "This meeting is out of order," she barked, banging her pen on the table. I didn't stop. Exhibit C, over 30 neighbor statements of harassment, excessive fines, and abuse of power. Exhibit D, documented bylaw violations committed by you, unapproved mailbox, non-standard fence paint, a dog that exceeds HOA weight limits. Should I go on? I spread the papers like a dealer at a poker table. The weight of evidence covered every inch. Karen's eyes darted, wild, searching for an ally. None came. That's when Mark, my lawyer friend, stood up from the back row. He adjusted his tie, his voice steady. "My name is Mark Preston. I'm representing Daniel. A criminal complaint has already been filed with the county prosecutor regarding the destruction of the memorial. Law enforcement will be reviewing this case. In addition, we are seeking Karen's immediate removal as HOA president, effective tonight." The room exploded. Applause, cheers, neighbors slapping tables. For once, the entire neighborhood spoke with one voice. Karen slammed her clipboard shut. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked. "I am the HOA president. I make the rules." And that's when the door at the back opened. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside. The sight of their badges drained the color from Karen's face. One officer said, "We need to speak with you regarding a complaint of property destruction." The gasp from the crowd was deafening. Karen stumbled backward, knocking over her chair. "This is harassment. I was enforcing community standards." The officer shook his head. "Community standards don't override federal law." That line, neighbors would quote it for months. Karen's shrill voice cracked as she shouted, "You're all against me. This neighborhood will fall apart without me." But no one answered. Not a single person defended her. As the officers guided her out, the final sound was the clank of handcuffs snapping shut. And the look on her face, a mix of rage, disbelief, and humiliation. The queen had been dethroned. Publicly. And I finally felt the weight lift off my shoulders. The days that followed felt like breathing fresh air after months of suffocation. Karen was charged with criminal mischief and destruction of a veterans memorial, pending investigation by the county prosecutor's office. Her fine, thousands of dollars. Her reputation, shattered. By the next HOA meeting, she was officially removed as president by unanimous vote. The motion took less than 5 minutes. Neighbors who once cowered under her clipboard now smiled as they signed the petition. Some even hugged me on the way out. But the best moment came 2 weeks later. On a hot Saturday morning, with the sun glaring off the asphalt, neighbors gathered in my yard. Together, we rebuilt the memorial. Fresh granite, polished smooth. The bronze plaque restored, shining brighter than before. The American flag rose again, rippling in the breeze. This time, I didn't stand alone. Veterans from nearby towns came to the dedication. Kids waved flags. Even the mayor showed up, placing his hand over his heart. I stepped forward, voice steady, though my throat was tight. This memorial isn't just for my father. It's for every man and woman who gave everything. And no clipboard, no bylaw, no self-appointed tyrant will ever erase that. The crowd erupted in applause. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt united, not under fear, but under pride. As for Karen, she moved out quietly not long after. No goodbye parties, no farewells, just a for sale sign hammered into her precious lawn. The street feels different now, lighter, peaceful. When I walk past the memorial, I see people pause, tip their heads, snap a photo, whisper a thank you. And me? I finally feel like my father has the resting place he deserves. But if you think that was the end of Karen's antics, you'd be wrong. Because just when we thought we'd seen the last of her, she found a new neighborhood and made new enemies